Okay, welcome to the third talk of the afternoon session. Anastasia Volovich will tell us about mathematical structure of scattering amplitudes.
All right, so hi everybody. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much, Young, for inviting me. So yes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about mathematical structures that we see in scattering amplitudes. And this is going to be based on the series of papers. So with my two current students, Jorge Margo, Li Cheng Ren, my former student who is now a postdoc actually at Oxford, Anders Schreiber, Mark Spradlin, who you're going to hear next, and our current postdoc, Akshay Yelishpur Srikant. So you can see the archive numbers and the pictures of these gentlemen. So here's the outline of my talk. Oops, can I? Okay, so I'm just gonna, since this is somewhat broader audience, I'm going to quickly start with some motivation and introductions of just the whole Amplitude program, which is going to have a couple slides on that. Then I'm going to tell you about the status of some of the computations and outline the main tools that we use in these computations. Then I'm going to move to this mathematical structures. So I'm going to explain the connection between 6 and 7 point amplitudes and cluster algebras. Then I'm going to tell you about some, once you see 6 and 7 points, you want to try to go to higher points. And then I'll tell you about some new features that start arising beyond 7 point amplitudes. And then I'm going to try to explain some of the new kind of a more modern development on trying to explain these features and derive some of the descriptions of those amplitudes from Plaby graphs. And then I'll have some conclusions. Okay, so very good. So scattering amplitudes. So scattering amplitudes encode the process of elementary particles interactions. So you have some particles come in, they interact, and some particles come out. And so when I say, okay, I have n point amplitudes, that means the total number of incoming and outgoing particles is n. So in this diagram here, you have a picture of a 4-point amplitude. So you have 2 particles come in and 2 particles come out. So you'll hear, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. Point amplitudes. So, and the amplitudes determine the probabilities of various outcomes. So you want to, you have something in and something come out, and you want to know what's the probability of that event to happen. Now, to compute those scattering amplitudes, in quantum field theory, we use Feynman diagrams. So we have a standard model, we have a Lagrangian, which supposedly is supposed to fit on the cup, but it's actually, it doesn't. So this is just very schematic. So you have different, particles. They interact through the known set of vertices, and you know what's in, you know what's out, and you try to connect in and out via possible diagrams. So this is again an example here of a electron positron going to a quark antiquark and a gluon. So 5-point amplitudes, and these rules are very well known. So the Lagrangian is known, the rules are known. So you say, why are people? Why am I talking here? This is it's all very well understood. Well, it turns out that when you actually start doing the computations, it's hard. So here I have 2 slides with some of the examples. So not only, so the rules are known, the Lagrangian is known. So not only the number of those diagrams start growing, and for example, these are here is some 6-point amplitudes at one loop. Also, each diagram, so they're this topologically different diagrams, and then each diagram has an expression. And if you start writing down an expression for each diagram, it also takes some non-trivial amount of space. So it just in practice, these are complicated. So that's, for example, an example of a 6-point amplitude. Moreover, when you start talking about loops, so you're doing these computations perturbatively in the coupling constant of your theory, and frequently these diagrams. So, for example, these are some of the diagrams which have say 4-point amplitudes, and they have 7 and 6 loops in them. So you have to do some integrals. So these, again, very well-known rules, but the integrals in practice are very complicated, and they're given in terms of some special functions. So here, can you see my pointer at all? Okay, so here are these integrals, and after a lot of work, these gets processed, and you get some very, very special functions afterwards. So the upshot of this is that, yes, the rules are known. We've studied this for many, many years, but in practice, it just gets complicated. And what we need to do is we need to develop some new tools for doing these computations. And thus, this Amplitudes program, there's a number of people who are working on this. There's an annual conference on that. And so the goals of this program is a twofold. On one hand, so you look at your favorite theory, you look at your favorite process, and you try to look for structures in these expressions. So for example, if you're computing something and then it all becomes 0, well, you must be missing something. There must be a reason why something complicated becomes a 0. So, so you would like to understand the math. Maybe there's a symmetry, maybe there's a better variables and whatnot. So on one hand, we'd like to explore the mathematical structures of amplitudes. And a lot of that is done by, okay, let me look at this amplitude and let me rewrite it in different variables or something. Okay, so then I can understand this better now. And of course, if you understand the mathematical structure of these amplitudes, you can make progress in computing these. And indeed, so you'd like to exploit this structure as much as possible to make previously impossible computations possible. And that's the whole sort of philosophy of this. You look at some complicated process, you come up with some variables or some symmetry, and you simplify the previously known expression, and then you go a step further. Nobody's going to believe you if you just say you understood something better. You want to compute something that somebody has not computed before. And there's been a lot of progress in the past 2 decades in this area, in different theories, applications to gravity, in gauge theory. Many processes are relevant to LHC and LIGO, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just my 3 slides about the whole program. But I'm going to tell you today, I'm going to tell you about something more specific. I'm going to focus on a particular theory called N=4 Young-Mills theory. So why do we study this theory? So it's not quite QCD, it's not quite set on model, but it's close enough to be interesting. So it's a quantum field theory which describes, real world particle interactions. And many techniques that we develop for this theory can later be applied to more realistic theories. So so it's a nice theory to study. So it's via ADS CFT, it's also a string theory. And so learning about N=4 Young-Mills theory teaches us about quantum gravity. And finally, this is a very nice theory. It's a solvable and integrable. It has a lot of symmetries. And this is a very non-trivial fact for 4-dimensional quantum field theory. So my talk today will be about N=4 Young-Mills theory. Okay, so very good. So what's the situation with amplitudes in this theory? Okay, so they've been computed to a very high order, and in the next slide I will have a review on that. And so people keep studying this because these amplitudes in this theory have many remarkable properties that have sparked interest from mathematicians working in combinatorics, algebraic geometry, and number theory. So this is a very interesting area. And at the same time, the methods that we've developed for N=4 Young-Mills theory have actually been applied to real-world QCD computations. Are there any questions about anything? Any program in general? No? Okay. Okay, so what's the status of these amplitudes? So we'll be looking at the endpoint amplitudes in this theory. And so I start high at 6 points. So at 4 and 5 point amplitudes, these are known to all loop orders. Because of the special symmetry called dual conformal symmetry, there's just a formula you can write for the expressions for these amplitudes at 4 and 5 points. Now, when you go to 6, so we're going to be increasing the number of external lines, external number of particles. So the 6 points are known through 7 loops. And so most of these computations were done by Lance Dixon and his collaborators. And the best sort of review, the best state-of-the-art situation and best review is just this archive number that I've written here. So there's various combinations of Lance Dixon's collaborators that worked on this over the years. So the 7 points are known through 4 loops. So these are very, very non-trivial computations. And so as you increase the number of points, 8 and 9 have been actually only recently computed by Song He and 2 of his collaborators. And there's some new features that are present that I'm going to describe. And for higher than 9, only particular helicity configuration amplitudes have been computed, and they've been known for a decade due to the work by Simon Caron-Huot. So that's where we are. Okay, so again, I repeat, we're looking at the particular theory and n equals 4 Yang-Mills theory, and that's the status of these amplitudes computations in this theory. Okay, so so now I'll tell you a little bit more about them. So how are these computed? So how are these computations done? They're not done by standard textbook methods. So the standard textbook method would be, okay, if you look at 6-point gluon amplitude, you would draw a diagram like this, and you write the contribution. You have to compute very, very complicated integral. But these are not how these are computed. So the way they're done by Dixon and collaborators, so one writes down an answer. So one thinks of this amplitude as a particular function. So no integrals, no Feynman diagrams. One writes down an answer as a linear combination of a special type of functions. And I will tell you momentarily what kind of functions we are looking at. And then determines the coefficients of these functions by solving a system of linear constraints. And these are really, basically large linear systems that one has to solve. That's a kind of, tractable problem. And so how does one fix this coefficients? Well, one fixes these coefficients by setting various physical constraints on those parameters. So here I copied a table from this review that I already mentioned. So you start, for example, say you start at 6 loop, oops, I'm gonna move this. You start at some 6 loop amplitude, and you start with, 3,672 parameters, and then you start applying constraint. Okay, some symmetries. There are some final entry has to be this and not that. In a particular limit, such as a collinear limit, it should reduce to something, in a Reggie limit, it reduces, there's a set of physical constraints. I don't want to go into great, it's systematically very well understood by these people. And what is remarkable is that after you set all those constraints, at the end, you get a unique solution. So that's quite remarkable. It's remarkable that solution exists, and then you can fix it by you can fix the amplitude by the system. But so these are that's the way it's been done, and they were able to go to as high as 7 loops. Okay, so now good. So oops. Okay, so now let me tell you about kind of 2 tools that I used along the way. Why is this special? Why are we talking about n equals 4? So in n equals 4, usually when we compute amplitudes, we write them down as a function of momentum. So you have some, some momentum P1, P2, P3, P4, P5, P6, etc. And the amplitude is a function of these momenta. So instead here, it's convenient to, instead of momentum, labeling amplitudes with a momentum, it's useful to use momentum twisters. So what one does, one goes from momentum, so has some momentum, you go to something called dual space. So you introduce, X, which is Pi minus Pj, something like that. And to each point, you associate a line in P3. So now, forget everything about momentum. So the amplitudes are going to be just labeled by Z's. So Zi, and they live in P3. So I labels the number of points and A is a P3 index, okay? Now, because of the special theory that we're looking at, which has this special symmetry called dual conformal symmetry, in these variables, this dual conformal symmetry is basically SL4C, and there's a natural SL4C invariant. So you can take, IJKL, labeled particles, IJKL. You can take a determinant. This is 4x4 determinant. So these are natural invariants. So anytime you see an expression, and I will have that momentarily for an amplitude, you'll see those brackets. So that's what these brackets are. Okay, so these are momentum twisters, and indeed they were first introduced by Penrose and Penrose's group in Oxford. In particular, very important work was done by Andrew Hodges and extensively been used by Nima Arkani Hamed and collaborators in the recent years. Okay, and so that's number one. So we think of these amplitudes as functions of these momentum twisters, so these brackets. Okay, so so these are the arguments of these functions. Now, what are those functions are? So these are some special functions, multi-polylog functions. So it turns out that at least MHV and NMHV, so these are some just, if you don't know the terminology, that's fine, and just some particular helicity configurations, at least for these ones. So I think Jake Bougeli is going to talk about high helicities. So at least for these particular ones, everything could be expressed in terms of multi-polylogs. So later on, we need some more complicated polylogs called elliptic polylogs, but you'll hear maybe from Jake about them. But I will just focus on those amplitudes could be expressed in terms of these multi-poly, the weights 2 times the number of loops. So what are the multi-polylogs? Well, it could be defined recursively. You take so if you're interested in a multi-polylog weight M, you take the differential of that function and you write it as F. So you have dfm is fm minus 1 d log some phi. And then this fm minus 1 again could be written as, the differential of dfm minus 1 is fm minus 2 d log, etc. And then you continue until you just get to the ordinary log. Okay, so for example, if you have a log, it's just d log. If you have the next simplest example would be li2 function. So dli2 is minus log 1 minus z d log z. So that's a weight 2 polylog. So in those recursive definitions, the arguments of, if you take the arguments of those logs and take a tensor product of them, that's called a symbol. So that's an important object describing these multiple polylogs. So for example, for li2, if I have this expression, the symbol of li2 is minus 1 minus z tensor z. Okay, so the object that I will be talking about for these, so these amplitudes are some polylog functions of some momentum twisters, and the object that I'd be interested in is the collection of those arguments of these logs sitting here, and that's called the symbol alphabet. So sometimes I will be using the slang, that this is a symbol alphabet, and this sets of phi's, they encode the physical meaning of that is that they encode all the singularities of amplitudes. And they also very important for this bootstrap. For when I was telling you here, I was, just hand waving, but actually what one starts with a known symbol alphabet and then bootstraps that. So it's very, very important. So, so these are the two special things that happen for n equals 4 Young-Mills theory. So let me give you some examples. So what's known? So as I said, 4 and 5 point amplitudes are known to a loop. So I'm not even going to talk about them. So for 6 point amplitude. I taught you, so let's just do a sanity check. I taught you that if you have 2 loop amplitude, the polylog is weight 4. So if you want to write down the function, it would be some Li4 of those various brackets of momentum twisters. And so if I ask what's the symbol alphabet for a 6 point amplitude, so what are the different types of the brackets that could appear? There'd be only 15 of those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So all you could have here are the Pluker coordinates of GR46. So they are always of the type A plus 1, B, C. Okay, so the symbol alphabet, in other words, for a 6 point amplitude is given by these 15 letters. Okay, good. So I'm going to slowly increase the number of n. So now then you look at 7 points. So again, you look at the amplitude computation and you look at the symbol alphabet. And the symbol alphabet for 7 points is given by the 49 letters. So there are not just Pluker coordinates, there are also quadratic functions of Pluker coordinates of the following type, that there are 7 of these and 7 of these, 14. So so 35 plus 14, you get 49 of these. And the function is a little bit more complicated, something called Li22. Okay, so these are, that's a result of the computations. Now, if you start increasing, you go to 8. So recently this has been computed in 2019 by Songhi and collaborators. So the symbol alphabet, again, becomes a bit more involved. So there are rational letters, at most cubic and quadratic in Pluker coordinates. So there are various, so I wrote some definitions, but no, not all. So these are the Plukers. Then there are various intersections. These friends we've seen already, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are 180 of those. And then there are 18 involving square roots. So I wrote as 2 times 9. There are these types and also one cyclic. And then there are various permutations. So that's the so that's for 8. And then moreover, recently was also computed for 9. There are again 59 times 9 rational letters of the following type, and there are also 99 square roots. Okay, so that's the results of the computations. And what we'd like to know, so I said I'm going to tell you a little bit about mathematical structures. The question we'd like to ask is the independent mathematical description of these symbol letters. So, so again, we forget about everything about amplitudes, just ask purely math question. Okay, these are just Pluker coordinates. We know these. Okay, what are these? And momentarily I have the answer to that. And then we want to move on to 8 and 9. So I give you the list and we want to know how to describe this in mathematics. Okay, so remarkably, for 6 and 7 points, that these are not just something; they are just very nicely described by cluster algebras. So, okay, I see there was an expert, a cluster algebra inventor of this, Misha Getman, online. So I will just, for others, describe this very quickly. So what we observed in our work long ago is that the symbol alphabets are, a natural conjecture is that these, once you see this formula, you conjecture that the natural object describing these coordinates is Grassmannian cluster algebra GR4n. Okay, so one slide. on Grassmannian cluster algebras. So it's a rich subject in mathematics. They were first invented by Fomin and Zelevinsky in 2002. So Grassmannian cluster algebras are due to Gechtman, Shapiro, and Weinstein and Scott. So to define a cluster algebra, you need two things. You need an initial quiver. For GR for n, the quiver is 3 by n minus 5 of this type, and you need a certain mutation rule. So a quiver, the way the arrows are drawn, that defines for you. So depending on how you fix a node, and depending on the orientation of the arrows, that some in or some out, you so from some coordinates ak, you define a mutation rule on that coordinates by this formula, and you do that for each coordinates, and this produces for you cluster coordinates. So that's what these cluster coordinates are. So you have a quiver, you have a mutation rule, and there are rules how to produce those. Okay, so let's just given this definition, let's apply this for 6 and 7 points. Well, this is the initial quiver for 6 points. For example, you mutate on the node 1, 2, 4, 5 in this manner, and you get a quiver like that, and you continue until you stop. And indeed, so for this particular case, you get 14 quivers, and you reproduce 15 cluster coordinates. Okay, which exactly matches exactly what we saw in the amplitudes. Then you proceed further, you do this for 7 points. So the initial quiver looks like that. You have your rules, you pick all your coordinates, you do mutation. And you get, in this case, you get 833 quivers, and you produce all your 49 cluster coordinates. So there are 35 pluckers and 14 quadratic and pluckers. And that exactly, so this is completely independent mathematical construction known to very well known to mathematicians, which we can now apply and produce the alphabet that we got from amplitudes. So this was very exciting until we start generalizing that for 8 points. So we'd like to be able to understand endpoint amplitudes. Okay, so first of all, it's known that for n greater than 7, the number of cluster coordinates start to become infinite. So here I said there are only 14 quivers and 833. So those cluster algebras become infinite. So however, in amplitudes, we see a finite subset. So we'd like to know what exactly is going on. And second of all, as you saw in these slides, the symbol alphabets start involving square roots of these plucker coordinates. That's also not something we could produce easily from these Grassmannian cluster algebras. Okay, so so this I already shown you. Okay, so we'd like to know what is the mathematical description. How do we describe those two lists, this one and this one, from some known mathematics? Now, there's been several, in the past 2 years, there's been several approaches to solving this problem. So there was some approach by James Drummond and his group using tropical geometry. There's a dual polytope construction by Nimar Kani, Hamid, Lam, and Spradlin. I'm going to tell you about our work trying to understand this from Plaby graphs. We also had some work describing this from something also known to mathematicians called tensor diagram. So Mark is going to tell you right after my talk about number 2 and number 4. And then there was an interesting proposal by a student of Henrietta in Vlang using sketching diagram. So these are just attempts, and these are sort of methods. These are interesting approaches. Some are better than others. Again, let me just repeat a problem. So the problem is to find a mathematical description of these two lists, this one and this one, okay? Okay, so I'm going to describe to you how to get this list from Plaby graphs. I have, 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
Well, you started a bit late, so I think we can slide it, and it's the last talk coming up. So I mean, I think we're being lenient with the time.
No, Mark's talking after me.
5 minutes or so it would be.
Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, I have 5 minutes. Is that what you said?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Right. So very good. So, okay, so I'll just sketch some of this. Okay, so of course, connection to Flappy graphs and amplitude is not new. There is a book. I saw Jake. I don't know if he's still here. I saw Jake online here. So there's a book by Nima, Jake, and Cacciazzo, Goncharo, Posing, Trinka. It has a Flappy graphs on its page, and we extensively used. So the most useful thing here is Jake's Mathematica program, so which students happily used. So now, when they were talking about connection Flappy graphs, they of course were talking about integrands. So now we are talking about integrated expressions. So we are talking about a final symbol alphabet for these amplitudes. So the suggestion is the following. So we would start with some Flappy graph. So Flappy graph comes with the matrix C, which parameterizes the cell of positive Grassmannians, and this cells are in correspondence with this Flappy graph. So given a Flappy graph, you quickly run Jake's code, you write your the matrix C, and then you solve this system CZ equals 0, okay? And you compare your results with known symbol letters. So that would be our strategy. So let me just give you an example. So we start with 6-point graphs of this form. Okay, so then we again, in this case, we parameterize this with face variables. We write out C, and then we plug it in CZ equals 0 and find all possible C's or F's, and then we look at so all these brackets are all Z's. So and then we look all and then we ask a question. So what are the possible what are the possible brackets that appear? And indeed, the what we get as an output is exactly the 15 letters that appear in the symbol alphabet. So for example, for this particular graph, that's the solution we get. And it could be summarized, we just look, this is really a very, very simple example. So it could be summarized by the following quiver. So we get, all these possible brackets. Now we do this for, so these are the graphs for 6 and 7. So we've done this systematically. So we have very good students who can do this. No time. So, and exactly reproduce the 6 and 7 point amplitudes from this procedure. So that's the methods that we're suggesting. Okay, so then we continue. So now we want to get square roots. So yeah, again, there was several approaches to getting the square roots, but remarkably, this we found extremely nice. You start with the Flappy graph of this form, and then you solve it. It's really 5 minutes. And then you immediately get the square root that you need. So that's a bit, we thought that's a very nice thing. And then, if you do some, I don't want to, so if you make some square move on some face, you can get all of them. So we were very excited when we were able to get those mysterious square roots just by such a simple algorithm. So, but then it wasn't, we ended up writing 3 papers on this. So this was great. We got the algebraic letters, but then we said, okay, very nice, but we have all these lists from Song. Can we get all the rational letters? And it was subtle. There's some subtleties. So we had to basically consider non-Flavic C's to be able to get all of the rational letters. And moreover, we showed that restricting to k equals n minus 4, but allowing arbitrary non-Flavic C's would always produce cluster variables. So an upshot of that is there's some work which was needed. And then in the meantime, while we were doing this, again, Song and his collaborators wrote down the 9. So again, it's much more involved. So we were happy that we were able to also get, through this method, we were able to get 8 and 9-point alphabet exactly. So from the Plavi graphs method, we got essentially the upshot of our work is we got both lists. Okay, so that's an approach that we took. Okay, so, but I should say we don't have a theory to explain the pattern, which cells associated to which symbol letter. So we're really doing it very phenomenologically. We go graph by graph, we see what we get. I would like to have a better understanding of what's going on. And yeah, what we're doing is really phenomenology. So we provided some phenomenological data in hope that future work will shed more light on this interesting problem. Okay, so hopefully that gives you the flavor of the mathematical descriptions of scattering amplitudes. And let me just conclude by summarizing what I told you about. So I told you that scattering amplitudes in n equals 4 Yang-Mills theory are described by GR for n cluster algebras for 6 and 7 points. And I also told you that starting at 8 points, one needs a mechanism producing finite subsets in GR for n, and also a mechanism to produce square roots. And we studied a candidate mechanism coming from Plavi graphs. And there's a lot more work remains to be done. It's nice to do it more systematically, more examples, 10 points have not been computed. Then there's a lot of work, this is all just simple alphabet, sort of the initial thing. Then there's you have to write down the functions, the cluster functions describing that. And then moreover, there's also some interesting work recently applying cluster algebras to non-n equals 4 Yang-Mills theory. So a lot more to learn. And in the next talk, so I'll stop now, but in the next talk, Mark will describe some other approaches to the same problem. So I'll stop. Are there any questions? No question.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
So I have a question about how you select your Plavi graph. So in one example, it looked like the graph that parameterizes the big cell, but in another example, it was clearly some smaller positroid cell. So is there any?
Right. No. The answer to this is no. So we just start with lists and see what we get. So that's what I said. It would be nice to have some more systematics and understand this better. This is exactly what I meant. So, we have basically, we after this list, okay, we have the list from amplitudes. This is how we do it. So we have a list. This is 8-point list, and this is 9-point list. Okay. So we just what we do, we try them all and see what we get. It's to the point that at 9-point, basically, we in the last paper we just basically have mutate here. That's what you get. So unfortunately, no. I wish I had more to say, but that's unfortunately the situation. Yeah, I think personally that more data is needed from amplitude sides. It would be nice to have those lists for 10, 11, etc., and then maybe some systematic. So, but right now we just, we take the graphs and we compare with the list. Yeah, so nothing, unfortunately, I wish I had better, yeah.
But also since you had to, in the last example, you had to make mutation in a 6 hexagon, this probably suggests that you maybe will have to work with, not with necessarily Plavi graph representation, but directly with Grassmannian quivers, just mutate and
yes, and we have some paths and in fact we've been actually one thing I keep telling all our collaborators, there's these green and the red mutations. So we've been these mutation, we have some length 5 mutations. I think 5 times we had to mutate at most. Okay. So we were looking for shortest paths, but basically it's really plug into Mathematica and see what you get. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes. Yes, there's a more question.
I had a simple question, Stasia. This is George. Hi, a nice talk, but I missed the point here. I missed the point. Why do cluster algebras appear only for a certain number of points? I mean, if you have scattering, let's say, of 5.
Yeah, so fives, because of this dual conformal symmetry, so for 4 is just 1, 2, 3, 4. There's nothing.
Okay.
So and for 5 is just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's so what it's and okay. I skip also this. What we're looking, I can tell you, there's something called BDS ansatz. So for 4 and 5 points amplitudes, they're just exponent of one loop amplitude. And then what we're actually looking here, and all the divergences are in this BDS ansatz. What we're here looking is something called remainder function. So this remainder function is actually 0 for 4 and 5.
Okay, I see. So these are kind of degenerate cases, 4 and 5.
Yeah, because of dual conformal symmetry, these are kind of yeah. So the proper definition of what I'm computing is this remainder function, and it starts only at 6 points. Yeah, so it's 0 at 4.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you.